The rain in New York City feels colder when your pockets are empty. Sylvester stood outside a small, dimly lit liquor store, his hands trembling. In his arms, he held Butkus, a bull mastiff with soulful eyes. Butkus wasn't just a dog. He was Sylvester's only witness to a decade of failure. He was the only friend who didn't laugh when Sylvester practiced lines in front of a broken mirror. But tonight, friendship had a price tag. $40, a stranger said, holding out a few crumpled bills. Sylvester looked at the money, then at his dog. His heart felt like it was being crushed by a hydraulic press. He handed over the leash. He watched the stranger walk away with his best friend. As the tail disappeared into the fog, Sylvester felt the last piece of his soul break. He had no food, no home, and now he had no heart. He walked back to a room that wasn't even a home. It was a cage of poverty. He had hit rock bottom. But to understand how he got here, we must go back to the very beginning. We must go back to the day the world first tried to break him. Sylvester Stallone didn't enter the world with a golden spoon. He entered with a medical tragedy. During his birth in 1946, a doctor's mistake with a pair of forceps severed a nerve in his face. It was a second that defined a lifetime. The left side of his lower face became a frozen mask. His lip drooped. His tongue struggled to move. His speech became a slurred mumble. Imagine being 6 years old, in a classroom where every word you speak is a joke to others. While other children dreamed of being astronauts or firemen, Sylvester just dreamed of being understood. Teachers ignored him. They labeled him slow and stupid. He was the boy who looked strange and talked even stranger. His home was no sanctuary either. His parents lived in a house filled with the thunder of arguments and the lightning of anger. When they finally divorced, 9-year-old Sylvester was left drifting like a ship without a map. He attended over 10 different schools in a few years. Each new school was a new stage for a new set of bullies. He was lonely, unwanted, and invisible. But inside that broken boy, a fire was beginning to burn. He didn't want to be a victim. He wanted to be a hero. He spent hours in dark movie theaters, staring at the screen. He watched the great actors of the 1950s. He didn't just watch them, he studied them. He realized that while his mouth was paralyzed, his eyes were not. His heart was not. He began to act in front of mirrors, using his body and his gaze to communicate what his voice could not. He eventually went to the University of Miami to study drama. People laughed again. An actor with a paralyzed face? That's like a bird with no wings, they said. But Sylvester didn't listen. He practiced until his vocal cords bled. He learned the rhythm of emotions. He knew he was different, and he started to believe that different might just be his greatest weapon. After college, he moved to New York City. This was the legendary City of Dreams. But for Stallone, it was the city of closed doors. He stayed in apartments so small they felt like coffins. When he couldn't pay rent, he slept in bus stations, shivering under thin jackets. He even spent weeks in a public library, not just to read, but to stay warm. He went to over 1,500 auditions. Can you imagine the strength it takes to hear no 1,500 times? Every time he walked into a room, the casting directors saw the droop of his mouth and heard the mumble of his voice. "You're not an actor," they told him. "Maybe try being a janitor or a bodyguard, but never a star." The world was screaming at him to give up. The hunger in his stomach was screaming at him to find a real job. But Stallone had a secret. He didn't want to be an actor. He wanted to be the actor. He wanted to tell a story that only a man who had suffered could tell. In the coldest winter of his life, after he had sold Butkus, Sylvester sat in his dark room. He had nothing left to lose. He had only a few sheets of paper and a dull pencil. He remembered a boxing match he had seen. A fight where a man named Chuck Wepner took hit after hit from the great Muhammad Ali and refused to stay down. Sylvester began to write. He wasn't just writing a script. He was writing his own blood onto the paper. He wrote for 72 hours straight. He didn't sleep. He barely ate. He created a character named Rocky Balboa, a man who was a nobody, a man who was laughed at, a man who was given one shot at greatness. When he finished, he didn't just have a movie script. He had a mirror of his own soul. He made a vow. This story is mine. I am Rocky, and I will not sell my soul for a meal. Little did he know, the world was about to offer him more money than he had ever seen, and he would have to make the most dangerous choice of his life. Sylvester held the script of Rocky in his trembling, cold hands. It was 72 hours of sweat, tears, and raw hope captured on paper. He knew, with a conviction that burned deeper than his hunger, that this story was his ticket out of the darkness. He began knocking on the doors of Hollywood studios, not as a beggar, but as a creator. The reaction was immediate. "This is incredible," the producers said. "It's a masterpiece of heart and grit." They saw the potential. They saw a gold mine. They offered him $125,000 for the rights to the script, to a man with only $106 in his bank account who had just sold his dog to buy a hamburger. $125,000 was a fortune from heaven. It was a new house, a new car, and a lifetime of full stomachs. But then came the condition. "We want a big star to play Rocky," they told him. "Maybe Ryan O'Neal or Burt Reynolds. Not you. You're just the writer." Sylvester looked at them. He thought about his empty refrigerator. He thought about the cold bus stations where he had slept. Then he thought about Rocky Balboa, the character who represented every scar on his face and every rejection in his soul. He stood up and said the two hardest words in the English language. "No deal." The producers thought he was crazy. They raised the offer. $250,000. Then $350,000. It was an astronomical amount of money in the mid-1970s. It was enough money to change his family's lineage forever. His friends told him to take the money. The world whispered in his ear, "Don't be a fool, Sylvester. You are starving. Take the cash and run." But Sylvester was listening to a different voice, the voice of his integrity. He knew that if he sold the script and watched someone else play Rocky, he would be selling his soul. He would be proving to himself that he was indeed not good enough, just as his teachers and bullies had said. He chose to stay hungry. He chose to keep the pain. He chose himself. Eventually, the studio gave in, but with a brutal compromise. They would let him act, but they would only pay him $35,000 for everything. The budget for the movie would be tiny. There would be no luxury, no trailers, and no guarantees. Stallone didn't blink. He said, yes. He didn't care about the money. He cared about the truth. The moment he received his small paycheck, Sylvester didn't go to a fancy restaurant. He didn't buy a suit. He went straight back to the liquor store where he had sold his best friend. He stood there for 3 days, leaning against the cold brick wall, watching every face that passed by. On the 3rd day, he saw the man. The man was walking Butkus. Sylvester ran to him, his heart pounding. "Please," he begged. "I have money now. I want my dog back. He is my heart." The man, seeing Stallone's desperation, sensed an opportunity for greed. "You want him back?" the man sneered. "It will cost you $15,000. It was a robbery. It was nearly half of everything Stallone had earned for his life's work, but Sylvester didn't hesitate for a single second. He paid the $15,000. He didn't just get a dog back, he reclaimed his loyalty. When Butkus jumped into his arms, licking his face, Sylvester wept. He whispered into the dog's ear, "We made it, buddy. We're going to show them." In a beautiful twist of fate, Butkus became a star too. If you watch the movie Rocky, the dog you see running beside Sylvester is the real Butkus, the real dog who saw the real hunger. The filming of Rocky was not a Hollywood dream. It was a battle. Because the budget was so low, they couldn't afford a large crew or expensive equipment. Stallone had to use his own clothes as costumes. His brother played a small role because they couldn't hire actors. They filmed in the freezing streets of Philadelphia without permits, often running away before the police arrived. In the iconic scene where Rocky runs up the steps of the Philadelphia Museum of Art, there were no fancy cameras. A friend of the cameraman held the camera while running behind Stallone. There was no money for a second take. Sylvester ran up those steps with every ounce of frustration and hope he had carried for 30 years. When he reached the top and raised his arms, he wasn't just acting. He was announcing to the universe, "I am still standing." When Rocky premiered in 1976, no one expected a miracle. But as the lights went down and the music started, the legendary "Gonna Fly Now," something happened in the darkness of the theaters. People didn't just watch a movie. They saw themselves. They saw their own failures, their own struggles, and their own desire to go the distance. When the credits rolled, the audience didn't just clap. They stood up and cheered until their throats were sore. Sylvester Stallone, the man with the weird face and strange voice, was no longer a joke. He was a symbol. That night, the underdog didn't just win a fight. He won the world. Rocky went on to win 3 Academy Awards, including Best Picture. Sylvester Stallone went from having $106 to being the most famous man on the planet. But his greatest victory wasn't the Oscar statue. It was the fact that when the world tried to buy his soul, he stayed in the ring and fought back. Success is a mountain with a slippery slope. After the massive triumph of Rocky, Sylvester Stallone became the king of Hollywood. He was no longer the man sleeping in bus stations. He was a global icon. In the 1980s, he gave the world another legend, John Rambo. Through Rambo, Stallone spoke for the forgotten soldiers, the men broken by war. He became the face of strength, the ultimate action hero. He was rich, he was famous, and he seemed untouchable. But life, much like boxing, has a way of hitting you when you least expect it. As the 1990s arrived, the world began to change. New stars emerged, and the action hero era started to fade. Stallone made a series of movies that failed at the box office. Critics who once praised him now mocked him. They said he was washed up, too old, and outdated. The man who once held the world in his hands found himself standing in the shadows again. The phone stopped ringing. The invitations stopped coming. For nearly a decade, Stallone was a ghost in the industry he helped build. However, the professional failure was nothing compared to the personal agony that was waiting for him. Stallone had faced poverty. He had faced hunger, and he had faced rejection. But nothing prepared him for the loss of his son, Sage Stallone. Sage had played Rocky's son in Rocky V. He was Sylvester's pride. In 2012, Sage passed away suddenly from heart disease at the age of 36. The man who played the strongest heroes on Earth was brought to his knees by a broken heart. There were no cameras, no scripts, and no happy endings. Stallone retreated from the world. He realized that all the money and fame in the world couldn't protect you from the deepest pain of all. He once said, "There is no pain like losing a child. It changes your DNA." In that silence, Stallone had to decide. Would he let the grief finish him? Or would he find one last reason to fight? In 2006, at the age of 60, Stallone did something everyone called crazy. He decided to bring Rocky Balboa back for one last film. Hollywood laughed. "A 60-year-old boxer? It's embarrassing," they said. They told him he would ruin his legacy. They told him he was a relic of the past. But Stallone wasn't doing it for the money or the fame. He was doing it because he had a beast inside him that still needed to speak. He needed to tell the world that being old doesn't mean being finished. He wrote the script for Rocky Balboa. In it, he included the most famous speech in movie history, a speech he wasn't just giving to his screen son, but to himself and to everyone watching. The world ain't all sunshine and rainbows. It's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward. That's how winning is done. When the movie was released, the world was stunned. The old man had delivered a masterpiece. He showed that the true strength of a fighter isn't in his muscles, but in his resilience. He followed this success by creating The Expendables, proving that the legends of the past still had fire in their souls. The ultimate redemption came in 2015 with the movie Creed. Stallone stepped back from being the main fighter. He played an aging, sick Rocky who mentors the son of his old rival, Apollo Creed. For this performance, Stallone didn't use his fists. He used his soul. He showed the world the vulnerability of a man facing his own mortality. He won a Golden Globe and was nominated for another Oscar. When he stood on that stage, the entire room, filled with young actors who grew up watching him, stood up in a 5-minute standing ovation. They weren't just cheering for a movie star, they were cheering for a survivor. Today, Sylvester Stallone is nearly 80 years old. He still wakes up early. He still trains. He still writes. He spends his days painting, expressing the emotions that words cannot capture. He looks at his daughters and his wife as his greatest trophies. What is the legacy of Sylvester Stallone? It is not the $400 million net worth. It is not the Bugatti in his garage. It is the message he left for every underdog in the world. He taught us that a paralyzed face can still speak to the heart. He taught us that a man who sells his dog to survive can eventually buy back his dignity. He taught us that failure is just a rest stop, not the end of the road. As you finish this story, look at your own life. What is your Rocky dream? What is the no you refuse to accept? Sylvester Stallone's life is a mirror. It shows us that as long as your heart is beating, the fight isn't over. You might get hit, you might get knocked down, and you might even lose your way. But as long as you are willing to get up one more time, you are a champion. The bell has not rung yet. Keep moving forward. Most people see Sylvester Stallone as a man of muscles and action. They see the sweat of Rocky and the scars of Rambo. But if you look closer, beyond the cinematic violence and the roar of the crowd, you will find a philosopher of the human spirit. Stallone is not just a survivor of Hollywood. He is a student of life who learned that the hardest battles are not fought in a boxing ring, but in the quiet corners of the soul. In his later years, Stallone turned to a passion many were surprised to discover: abstract painting. Long before he was an actor, He was an artist. He paints with the same intensity he uses to write his scripts. His canvases are filled with bold reds, deep blacks, and chaotic strokes. He says that when he cannot find the words to describe his pain or his joy, he speaks through the brush. His art is a reminder that every human being is multidimensional. You are not just your job, your failures, or your bank account. You are a creator. Stallone teaches us that to heal, we must express what is hidden inside us. For a man who spent decades playing the lone wolf on screen, Stallone's real-world sanctuary is his family. After the heartbreak of his early divorces and the devastating loss of his son Sage, Sylvester devoted his life to being a present, loving father to his 3 daughters, Sophia, Sistine, and Scarlett. In the quiet of his home, he is not Sly the superstar. He is a dad who worries, who gives advice, and who protects. He often tells his daughters, "Do not rely on my name. Build your own strength." The world will try to tell you who you are, but you must be the one to hold the pen. He transformed his past pain into a protective shield for his family. He proved that the ultimate victory for a man is not an Oscar statue, but the love and respect of his children. He traded the fleeting noise of fame for the enduring warmth of a home. Now in his late 70s, Stallone has a perspective that only comes from decades of falling and rising. He often shares his thoughts on aging, and they are powerful. He doesn't try to hide his wrinkles or pretend he is 20 again. Instead, he wears his age like a badge of honor. He believes that age is a mindset. He continues to work, starring in series like Tulsa King, showing that the fire of ambition doesn't have to go out just because the hair turns gray. One of his most profound lessons is about fear. He says, "I've been scared my whole life. Scared of failing, scared of being rejected, scared of not being good enough." But courage is not the absence of fear. It's moving forward while your knees are shaking. This is the message the world needs today. In an era of social media where everyone pretends to be perfect, Stallone stands tall with his imperfections. He tells the youth, "It's okay to be broken. It's okay to be weird. It's okay to be slow. Just don't stop." As we conclude the journey of Sylvester Stallone, we must ask, why does his story matter so much? It matters because Sylvester Stallone is the living proof of the American dream, but with a realistic twist. He showed us that the dream isn't about getting rich overnight. It's about having the stomach to stay in the game when everyone else has gone home. He still keeps a photo of his dog, Buttkiss, near him. That photo is a bridge to the man who once had nothing. It keeps him humble. It keeps him hungry. He knows that the distance between a bus station and a mansion is not measured in miles, but in the amount of no's a person can survive. As you finish watching or reading this 4-part saga, take a deep breath. Look at your own challenges. Maybe you are struggling to learn a new language. Maybe you are facing a rejection at work. Maybe you feel like the world doesn't see your value. Remember the man who couldn't speak clearly. Remember the man who sold his dog for $40. Remember the man who was told 1,500 times that he was not an actor. If he had listened to the world would have never known Rocky. The story of Sylvester Stallone is a gift to you. It is a reminder that your current situation is not your final destination. You have a script inside you that hasn't been written yet. You have a Rocky moment waiting for you in the future. Don't sell your soul for comfort. Don't let your scars make you ashamed. Let them make you proud. Because in the end, it's not about the trophies on the shelf. It's about the fact that when life hit you hard, you looked life in the eye, took the hit, and said, "Is that all you've got?" Keep moving forward. Your story is just beginning. The stadium is quiet now. The cheering fans have gone home, and the bright lights of the boxing ring have dimmed. But for Sylvester Stallone, the fight has never been about the physical opponent. It has always been about the clock, the doubt, and the internal voice that asks, "Have you given everything?" As we reach the conclusion of this epic journey, we must look at what it truly means to live like a fighter in a world that is constantly trying to knock you down. In his late 70s, many men choose the comfort of a rocking chair and the silence of retirement. But Stallone is built differently. He recently starred in Tulsa King, a role that required him to learn thousands of lines and work long hours in the heat. When asked why he doesn't just stop and enjoy his millions, his answer was simple. "The day I stop moving is the day I start dying." This is the core of his philosophy, that a human being is designed to be useful, to create, and to struggle. Without the struggle, there is no growth. Without the growth, there is no life. We often use the phrase, "never give up," as a cliché, but Stallone turned it into a science. He realized early on that talent is common, but endurance is rare. He watched many actors who were more handsome, more articulate, and more perfect than him disappear into obscurity. Why? Because they couldn't handle the no. Stallone's life teaches us that success is a game of attrition. It belongs to the person who can stay in the cold the longest. Think back to the man standing outside that liquor store, selling his dog. He didn't have a plan B. He didn't have a safety net. He only had a why that was bigger than his how. If your why is strong enough, whether it is to provide for your family, to prove your worth, or to express your art, then no how can stop you. Stallone's why was to show the world that the underdog has a soul. That why carried him through 1,500 rejections and 80 years of life. Today, when Stallone smiles, you can still see the slight droop in his lip. You can still hear the gravelly, slurred tone in his voice. In the beginning, these were his greatest shames. Today, they are his greatest honors. They are proof that you do not need to be perfect to be a masterpiece. In fact, it is our imperfections that make us relatable. Rocky Balboa wasn't loved because he won every fight. He was loved because he bled, he cried, and he was human. Stallone's legacy is the democratization of greatness. He told the world that you don't need a Harvard degree, a perfect face, or a wealthy father to change history. You just need the heart to stand your ground. This is a message of hope for the student struggling with exams, the entrepreneur facing bankruptcy, and the immigrant learning a new language. Your weakness is simply a strength that hasn't found its purpose yet. As this story ends, the focus shifts from Sylvester Stallone to you. Why did you listen to this 5-part journey? Was it just to hear about a movie star? Or was it because something deep inside you recognized your own struggle in his? Stallone's life is a mirror, and today, that mirror is asking you a question. What are you going to do with your pain? You can use your pain as an excuse to quit, or you can use it as fuel to write your own script. You can let the world's no define you, or you can let it sharpen you. Remember, the world is a bully. It will hit you, it will trip you, and it will laugh when you fall. But the world has no power over a person who simply refuses to stay down. Sylvester Stallone once said, "I am a very simple man. I just don't know how to quit." As you go out into the world today, take a piece of that spirit with you. Carry the memory of the $40 dog and the $15,000 reunion. Carry the memory of the 72-hour writing marathon and the Oscar stage. But most importantly, carry the belief that your life is worth fighting for. Your Rocky moment is not a destination. It is a way of living. It is the choice to get up one more time. It is the choice to speak, even if your voice shakes. It is the choice to keep moving forward. The bell has rung for the final time in this story, but for you, the first round is just beginning. Step into the ring, own your story, and never, ever sell your soul. Keep moving forward.